Hey, what's up YouTube? Your boy Chris. I'm out in the Caliente garage. In this video, I'm going to do a review of this oil drain pan that I actually picked up to do the oil change on my 2021 Honda Goldwing DCT model. The less mess drain pan is not that tall. It's actually very long. The Honda Goldwing holds 4.9 quarts of oil doing an oil change, but this drain pan actually holds up to 11 quarts of oil. So I think this will be a good tool for doing an oil change on the new model Honda Goldwing, being that it's not that tall and it's long. So when you're doing an oil change on the new style Honda Goldwing, it can get really messy because the lack of space underneath the Honda Goldwing. So I'm going to go over with you just some of the things that I'm going to use to perform this oil change on this 2021 Honda Goldwing DCT model. So let's get started. I will include a link in the description of the video of where you could pick up the less mess drain pan. One of the reasons that I picked this up because of the height. If I take a measuring tape to just measure the height of it, I'm showing 4 inches tall, and the length on it is about 22.5 inches on the length. So underneath the Honda Goldwing, under the new model Honda Goldwing, you don't have a lot of space. It's limited space. So I think this will be great. And also it has a place to sit the oil filter when you remove the oil filter. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to use that underneath the Honda Goldwing, but it does have a spot that allows the oil filter to drain. Some of the items that I will use to perform the oil change, I'm going to be using the Amsoil 100% synthetic metric oil. Is formulated for 4-stroke engines. The Honda Goldwing calls for a 10W30, but since I pull a trailer, I'm going to go back with some 10W40, but the book calls for 10W30. Also, I will be going back with the Honda OEM filter and replacing the crush washers. Also, I'm going to replace the transmission filter on this DCT model. And some of the tools that I will be using is a oil filter wrench cup for the oil filter. I have a 3/8 drive ratchet. The socket size for the drain plugs is 12 millimeter. The Honda Goldwing DCT model has 3 drain plugs. I will use this 5/16 socket to replace the transmission filter. You have 2 screws that requires removing to take out the transmission filter, and that socket size I'm using is a 5/16. To actually pull out the transmission filter, I'm going to just be using this snap ring tool to pull out the transmission filter. Also, got to have rubber gloves. Changing the oil on the Honda Goldwing gets very messy, so I like to wear rubber gloves to keep my hands clean. So let's get started on changing the oil. Now that I have the dipstick removed, and now we can go underneath the Honda Goldwing. So now that I have the Honda Goldwing on the center stand, I have the engine oil warm. I'm going to put on my rubber gloves. Now that I have my rubber gloves on, I got my shop towels handy. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to let the oil out. So I got my less mess drain pan, and it fits directly underneath this Honda Goldwing. I'm going to take my 12 millimeter socket, And now I'm going to just break the bolt free. One turn. I'm going to do the second one counterclockwise. So now I'm ready to let the oil out. One of the things I like about this pan is that the Honda Goldwing holds 4.9 quarts during an oil change, but this pan actually holds 11 quarts of oil. I can let out my second drain, my oil drain, making sure to keep up with that crush washer. I want to just let that oil drain out. This oil actually has about 6,000 miles on it. The Honda Goldwing calls for an oil change every 8,000 miles. But I figured it would be a good time to change the oil. So while that's draining, I'm going to take my oil filter cup. I'm going to take my little extension that goes on the ratchet. It goes right on to the oil filter cup. I will include in the link of the description of the video or where you can pick up one of these oil filter cups for the Honda Goldwing. Now I can just turn this counterclockwise. A couple of turns. I can remove my So now that I have it loose, now I can just let that oil filter drain. Now I can sit it over on the top, let it drain. So while that's draining, now I can work on taking out the rear oil drain plug. Looking at the rear of the Honda Goldwing, I'm going to take my 12mm socket, just break it free. Slide my pan over the drain plug. I want to make sure that I don't drop this plug into the oil. I have a pop quiz for you guys. How many drain plugs are on the non-DCT model? How many drain plugs are on the non-DCT model? On the DCT model, you have 3 drain plugs for the oil, but how many drain plugs are there on the non-DCT model? Be sure to put that down in the comments of the video. And we still have 2 bolts that has to be removed for the transmission filter. So now, while that's draining, I can slide this pan to the side. We got 2 bolts that needs to come out to drop the transmission filter. So I'm going to take my 5/16, take my ratchet, Now I can loosen the bolts. And underneath that cap is a spring. We need to make sure that we don't lose the spring underneath the cap. I'm going to just reach in by hand, see if I can remove one of these bolts without dropping the screw over into the oil. There's one. And we have one more. I like this pan because you can actually get your hand over the top of the pan and underneath the Honda Goldwing. So that's the second bolt. Those bolts are the same size. And try to pull down on this cap. I want to make sure that it doesn't plop off. Just it's a spring under there. You want to make sure I don't lose that spring. There's the spring. So to remove the transmission filter, I'm going to use my snap ring pliers. You can use needle nose, you can use pointed tools, pliers. I'm just going to reach in and I'm going to open up my tube and grab the transmission filter. So I'm going to reach in, I'm squeezing the tube, and I'm just going to pull down. Just going to pull down. It came right out. Look at that. Needle nose pliers work, but with this snap ring tool, you can reach in and grab that inner section where the spring actually goes, and you can actually hold the filter. So while that's draining, I'm going to take my new filter, and basically how this is going to work, the gasket is going to go up to the top and the spring is going to go at the bottom, but it's going to be upside down like this. So I'm just going to put the spring in after I push the transmission filter up in the engine housing. Okay, it's pressed in. Want to make sure you check your O-ring, make sure that it's still attached, make sure that it's still good. Going to replace the rear screw to stop this oil from leaking. Going to replace this rear drain plug to stop the oil from leaking on the rear. Take my 12mm socket. Tighten it back down to the manufacturer specification. So I'm going to take the housing, take my ratchet, Let me get it started with my tool. There's a lot of tension on that spring, so just want to turn that screw. I can start on my second screw. So now I can tighten back down the clutch filter cap. Make sure that bevel is to the outside, to the exhaust side. And now I can put back the two front drain plugs. So since I have two new crush washers, these crush washers are probably good, but I'm going to just change them out. That's one. Take off the old crush washer. Put on the new crush washer with the flat washer toward the engine. Just want to get it started. My second drain plug. And that's the thing about doing your own oil. You know it's done right, and you know that it's done to your standards. A 12 millimeter. Tighten those back down to the manufacturer specs. And now I'm prepared to put back the oil filter. So before I put back the oil filter, I'm going to take some of my AMSOIL and I'm going to just pour some over into the filter, just to have the filter primed. And then I'm going to take some of that oil and just rub it around the top of the gasket that's on the filter. Take some of that clean oil and just rub around the gasket. So now that I have the oil filter filled with oil, I have the gasket lubed with fresh oil, and now I can put back the oil filter, get it started by hand. Now I can take my oil filter cap, a couple turns, don't over tighten it. Swipe up any excess oil. And now I'm ready to fill the Goldwing back with synthetic oil. Now on the left side of the Goldwing, I can remove the oil cap. I'm going to take my funnel, and now I can pour in the AMSOIL. The Goldwing calls for a 10W30, but since I pulled a trailer, I'm going to go back with some 10W40. Wipe up any excess oil, put back on my oil filter cap. So now I can dispose of the used motor oil. I have a 5-gallon jug that I use to pour in my motor oil, and I can take this down to the parts store like AutoZone and just dispose of the motor oil. So now I'm going to pour the motor oil over into the jug. Pour it over into the jug. That's one of the things I like about this oil pan, is that it's got a spout that allows you to pour out the oil without making a mess. So this is going to conclude the video of the oil change on this 21 Honda Goldwing, using the less mess drain pan that I use to capture all of the old oil. I will include a link in the description of the video of where you can pick up one of these drain pans for your new style Honda Goldwing or the previous generation Goldwing as well. If you like this video, be sure to click the like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And I will talk to you guys later. See you. It's between the top line and the bottom line. Perfect.